Good morning, everybody. Sunday morning. I am in Chicago, and Rabbi Epstein is in Israel. For those of you I haven't had the chance to meet yet, I'm David Katz, long time member of Anshe. I grew up in synagogue and have had the privilege of being part of the search committee over these last 2 years as we've tried to identify and find both a permanent rabbi and in this case an interim rabbi. In the course of that process, have had the chance to get to meet and get to know Rabbi David Epstein, who is here with us today. So that's a little bit on me. Really want to thank everybody who's watching this live, as well as those who may come back and watch it later. Hopefully, give you a chance to get to know Rabbi Epstein a little bit based on this morning's conversation. What we've got in mind is over the course of the next hour or so, we've asked Rabbi Epstein to spend about 10 or 15 minutes teaching. So we're going to get the benefit of his thoughts on a topic that he's prepared and thought would be useful and interesting for this setting. And then we have accumulated about 15 or so questions that have been submitted by members of the congregation, areas that they'd like to hear Rabbi Epstein's thoughts on. And they basically fall into four broad categories. There's a few questions around his previous experience and background, a few questions about his interest in the position, both at Anshe and on an interim basis in Chicago. We're going to touch a little bit on his beliefs and level of observance and how that's a fit with what we're doing at Anshe. And then we're going to finish with some thoughts on Israel and America and some of the more geopolitical issues related to Zionism and all that we're reading about in the press every day. Rabbi, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And as a longtime Cubs fan as well, I encourage you to drink as much coffee as out of that mug as fits you. But I'll turn it over to you and love to hear your thoughts and teachings for us this morning.
Thanks, David. Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to share some Torah and your morning coffee with you and then answer some of your questions. I hope that this time we spent together will give you a better sense of who I am and what I can bring to the table should I be chosen as your interim rabbi. Once upon a time, there was a king who ruled his kingdom with wisdom and compassion. As he approached the end of his days, everyone wondered who would be the next ruler. To keep the contenders from fighting over the throne, the king put the name of his successor in an envelope to be opened only upon his death. When that day arrived, the kingdom mourned its wise and caring leader. And then all eyes anxiously watched the prime minister open the letter. Surprisingly, the king had chosen the jester. The jester? Everyone in the kingdom thought this must be a joke. How could a fool be king? But such were the king's instructions. And so the jester was brought before the royal court, where attendants replaced his jester costume with the robes and crown of the king. At first, the situation was awkward for the new king as well as his kingdom. But over time, it turned out to have been a brilliant choice. The jester was every bit as wise, as compassionate, and as insightful as the old king had been. He listened to everyone with care, advisors, generals, even the commoners, and treated everyone who came before him with respect and kindness. He used his powers to bring peace and prosperity to his kingdom. And to the amazement of all in the royal court, the jester grew to be a superb ruler, and everyone in the kingdom came to love and accept him. The mystery that was part of their beloved king's life, though, was something they didn't quite understand. Every so often, he would lock himself in a distant room in the palace for a few hours, to which only he had the key. Then he would return to the throne and his duties. Most people assumed that he went to the room to think, to meditate, or to pray. One day, an ambassador from a far off land came to visit the king. They spent many hours together, and the ambassador grew to appreciate the king's wisdom and kindness. It was rare, he thought, for a king to listen as carefully as this king listened, or to seek advice from everyone who appeared before him, and to care as deeply and to work as hard for the good of his subjects as this king did. But unlike the king's subjects, the ambassador just couldn't let go of the mystery. He just had to know what was in that locked room that kept the king so wise and kind. So one day, when the king retreated to his room, the ambassador secretly followed him. When the king locked the door, the ambassador peered through the keyhole, uncovering the king's great secret. This is what he saw. In the privacy of the room, the king removed his crown and his royal robes and donned the jester costume. He danced around the room, making funny faces, singing silly jester songs. Then he stood before a great mirror and recited to himself, "Never forget who you are. You may look, sound, and act like the king, but you are only the jester, pretending to be the king. Never forget who you are." Now the ambassador understood everything, that the king's kindness and greatness emanated from his humility. This made the ambassador love the king even more and privately swore his everlasting loyalty to the king, vowing never to reveal his secret. Over the years, the king and ambassador grew even closer. Eventually, the ambassador confessed what he had witnessed, even as he proclaimed to never tell another soul. "But," said the ambassador, "there is one thing I have never been able to figure out. Of all the people in the royal court whom the old king could have chosen to succeed him, why did he choose you, the jester?" The king smiled at his friend and replied, "And who do you think he was before he became king?" Nobody really knows the origin of this story. I found it in a book of stories called Capturing the Moon, compiled by an esteemed colleague of mine and Rabbi Siegel's, Rabbi Ed Feinstein, of the fabled California shul, Valley Beth Shalom. If this weren't a one-way live stream, I would ask you to share your impressions of the story here, and I would ask you some questions. Maybe I would ask, was there ever a time in your life when you had to say to yourself, "Never forget who you are. You are only the jester pretending to be a king"? And then I might ask you if there are people in your orbit that need to look in the mirror. And together we would discuss, share insights, and learn what we could about our own lives from the story. But since I can't hear your answers, I'll share my thoughts with you, and hopefully you'll share yours with me at a later date. I found this story so appropriate for us at this moment in your lives for many reasons, not the least of which is that it describes a community that is undergoing a change in leadership and a wise man who wants the best for the community that he loves. It describes with colorful adjectives all of the characteristics of a great leader: wisdom, compassion, caring, respect, good listening, hardworking, advice seeking, etc. But above all, the story teaches us that a true leader must be humble. Let's dive a bit deeper into the trait known as humility. The origin of the word humility comes from the Latin noun humilitas and derives from the word humus, or earth. As recently as 1998, the Oxford Dictionary entry defined humility as having a low opinion of oneself or not being prideful. Just think about the ways that we use the word humble, humble origins, humble pie. I'd like to join the more recent voices that suggest that the definition of humility is more about remembering the humus, the earth from where we come, or in modern terms, being grounded. Over the past 10 years, I've become a student of Musar. The Hebrew word musar translates loosely into morality. The development of the Jewish ethical discipline known as Musar is fascinating in and of itself. But for the sake of brevity, I will say that it's an ethical, educational, and cultural movement in Judaism that developed in 19th century Lithuania, particularly among Orthodox Jews. In the last 30 years, Musar has enjoyed a revival in North America. One of the pillars of Musar literature is the quality of humility. But Musar humility departs greatly from the self-deprecating Oxford Dictionary entry I mentioned earlier. Dr. Alan Marinis, an accomplished modern-day Musar scholar, emphasizes that being humble doesn't mean being a nobody, a nebbish. In fact, the modern Hebrew word for humility, anvut, is much more nuanced with very different connotations than the classic English definition of humility. Dr. Marinis posits that there is a continuum of humility. On one end are those who truly believe that they are worthless, and on the other end are those who are arrogant to the point of narcissism. Alan Marinis reminds us that true humility, anvut, is somewhere in the middle of these two extremes. In fact, many Jewish thinkers and Musar scholars make the case that humility should correspond to a healthy sense of self-esteem. And I agree with them. Our sages teach that our greatest leader was Moses, who was described this way in the book of Numbers, Bamidbar. Moses was very humble, more than any other men who were upon the face of the earth. Let's look for a moment at Moses's humble origins, which don't seem to be those of the greatest Jewish leader of all time. Moses was separated from his mother as an infant and was deprived of growing up amongst his people. He was a person with a speech disorder, and he was quick to anger, and that is only a partial list. Perhaps this beautiful midrash can illuminate why Moses was selected to lead the children of Israel. While Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, a small goat ran away. Moses chased after it until it stopped to drink from a pool of water in a shady place. "I didn't know that you ran away because you were thirsty," he said to the goat. "You must be tired." He lifted the goat onto his shoulders and carried it back to the flock. The Midrash continues. God observed this act of compassion and said, "Since you tend the sheep of human beings with such mercy, you shall be the shepherd of my flock, Israel." When he ran after the goat, Moses was radically attentive to the needs of others because he was not preoccupied with himself. He was free and thus able to respond to what was in front of him. Other schools of thought today call this mindfulness. I don't believe God was rewarding Moses with a promotion. Rather, God is recognizing that Moses has already become what a leader of Israel must be, someone whose self is transparent enough that the divine purpose can shine through him unobstructed. Because of this humility, Moses achieved the status that Musar thinkers describe as greatness or gadlut, from the Hebrew word gadol, big. This specific term implies a level of internal perfection, not the external trappings of greatness measured by wealth, adulation, honors. It refers to an expanded state of the soul, a condition in which a person transcends narrow self-concern and operates from a place of broad awareness and responsibility. Musar thinkers often contrast Gadlut HaNefesh, the greatness of the soul, with Katnut HaNefesh, smallness of the soul. In Katnut, a person is contracted, reactive, self-focused. In Gadlut, a person is expansive, calm, and outwardly oriented. Another modern-day Musar scholar, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, explains that Gadlut is achieved by refining and quieting the self until something larger can move through it. This Thursday evening, we begin the celebration of Shavuot, Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of our Torah. A great 19th century sage teaches the following. Paradoxically, Moses was able to receive the Torah precisely because he was at the highest stage of Gadlut, possessing the humility needed to create an appropriate inner space where the divine light would not be distorted by self-interest. Moses learned. Remember the young Moses who struck the rock? He learned to become so ego-free that he could be filled with something far greater, the divine will, the pressing needs of an entire nation, and the weight of revelation. Describing Moses as the most humble man on earth and the greatest leader in Jewish history are not two conflicting depictions of Moses. They are one and the same, seen from two angles. So too our jester who became king. His humility is the very measure of his gadlut. When choosing the jester to succeed him, the king sees not just a kind man, but a man whose soul is large enough to simultaneously hold the suffering of the small as well as of an entire kingdom. But more importantly, the jester king is humble enough to know the dangers of power and wisely reminds himself occasionally in a very graphic way of who he used to be. This humility balances the success he enjoys daily by being the best version of himself that he can be. I'd like to conclude with two wishes for you, the community of Anshe Emet, during this year of transition and henceforth. May you collectively be wise enough to ensure the continuation of your long tradition of being blessed with humble and compassionate leaders who remember where they came from and who are able to make space for you. And may you as individuals always have a firm grip on the humility needed to occupy the space that will allow you to become the person you want to be. Thank you.
Thanks, Rabbi Ebstein. That was wonderful. First of all, thank you for teaching into a Zoom camera. I imagine it's challenging to do that just looking at a camera. So thank you and bringing the feeling and the insight. I'm tempted to go off script and scrap the questions, and you and I could have a very fun discussion about what you just shared. But I think we will provoke the outrage of people listening to this. But fascinating, and you touched on so many topics that are relevant to all of us. It's just kind of just listening to you. It's remarkable that it was 1998 that definition. Maybe the definition still is the same definition in the dictionary. When you read it up front, it struck me as completely the wrong definition, the wrong meaning of humility. And I'd be interesting to see if it's ever changed. But thank you for sharing, so that others can get an additional and even fuller sense of you and what you bring to this position. And thank you for considering this position. It's an honor to be here with you today. As I mentioned, let's start a little bit with your previous experience and how that informs the way you would approach the job at Anshe Emet. Tell us a little bit, or I'll say it differently. As you well know, we like to think of Anshe Emet as a big tent synagogue with a lot of groups, a lot of perspectives, a lot of interests. coming at our common faith and beliefs in slightly different ways with different, maybe different even priorities. Tell us a little about your experience dealing with diverse communities as a rabbi in the past.
Honestly, I wish that in the synagogues I worked for previously, there would have been more opportunities to work with diverse populations. And I look forward to those opportunities here. Having said that, I've had lots of experience with diverse communities throughout my life, not just directly through my pulpit rabbinate. And in any congregation that I've worked for, there was enormous diversity of views, of ages, etc. So that's really the hallmark of rabbinic work. It's working with many different kinds of people.
Have you been a rabbi of a Masorti or conservative synagogue in Israel?
No, I haven't. And here is why. Being a pulpit rabbi in Israel is very different from being a pulpit rabbi in North America. It is next to impossible to support a family on a pulpit rabbi salary. So that was never my career path when we made Aliyah 31 years ago. As many Olim, new immigrants to Israel, do, I pivoted and moved to the field of Jewish education and worked in a number of different settings until I arrived at the profession that I have been doing for the past 15 years, which essentially has three different tracks. My primary occupation is helping families who visit Israel and want to celebrate life cycle events, mostly B'nai Mitzvah, but also weddings, baby namings, and of course, funerals. I've had the privilege of officiating at well over 1,000 B'nai Mitzvah over the years, including some Anshe Emet families. The second thing I do is I am a licensed Israeli tour guide, something which I love very much. The third part of my professional life is providing rabbinic services to different congregations in the United States, which I will elaborate on in one of your upcoming questions.
Right, right. Because I want to make sure we get to that. And, I've had the benefit of previous conversations with you and have an appreciation for your pulpit experience really going back to the 90s. So we need to make sure to get to that. Talk a little bit about why you're leaving Israel and why a position like this on an interim basis would be attractive and the right thing for you at this next transition for you.
So I bet whomever asked that question never anticipated that I would answer it in the way I am about to. Many years ago, not long after I met the woman who was to become my wife, we decided to get engaged. After a long night of discussion, we made a deal. I would agree to move to Israel if she would agree that at some point I would have an interim pulpit back in the US, allowing me to pursue my primary professional love, serving as a pulpit rabbi. I was lucky enough to serve as an interim rabbi in a congregation in Deerfield in the first year of COVID. And while it was a wonderful experience, my actual contact with the congregants was limited for obvious reasons. I had always hoped that the right opportunity would present itself again. For me, the right opportunity would have to be one in Chicago, so I could be near my elderly father, my sister and her family, and all of my closest friends. Two, at a thriving conservative synagogue. And three, at a point in my family's life that felt right. This opportunity is all of those things, and the chance to serve the community of Anshe Emet would be extremely exciting and fulfilling.
No, that's great. I mean, it's in a funny way. Sounds like this hits on all the objectives. How do you view the role of an interim rabbi, and what might be some of your priorities for the year-long set of responsibilities?
The description of the role of interim rabbi sent out to the congregation along with the Zoom link to this call summarizes this role better than anything I can say myself. And somebody beautifully wrote, the role of the interim rabbi is quite different than the role of the senior rabbi. The interim rabbi is intended not to be a visionary or a change maker, but rather to provide a calming voice and a warm presence during this period of transition. An interim rabbi should be someone with a kind pastoral presence who carries the requisite scholarship and team spirit to successfully partner with the clergy team in providing excellent services to the community in this coming year. And I'd like to think that I am that person. As for my priorities, I'll be answering that shortly in a different question. And just to clarify, I'm not leaving Israel.
The we'll get to priorities. It's a little bit out of order, but what would be you'll have priorities. What would be areas that you expect wouldn't be you wouldn't be as involved with as interim, as opposed to a senior rabbi? What are the areas as an interim rabbi? You mentioned kind of strategy and vision, but are there more specifics you can put around that?
Well, first of all, I pray for everyone in the Anshe Emmett family to have good health and fortune with as few tragedies as possible. The second thing I prefer not to be involved with are anti-Semitic incidents, meaning I hope that they don't happen. And the third thing is senseless hatred, what our rabbis denote as sinat chinam. But of course, my job as a rabbi, specifically in these three spheres, is one, to provide comfort and spiritual guidance when there are deaths, when tragedy strikes. Two, to stand strong against the forces of evil and help you become more resilient as a community and as individuals. And three, to mediate between people, to encourage them to engage more kindly with each other.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. Adult education, would that be a priority and something you'd like to get involved with in a meaningful way over the course of the next year?
Absolutely. I see one main aspect of my role as a teacher. I love to teach. So a resounding yes, yes, yes. I will be offering adult education classes.
Good, good. No, I think that's a big area where you could contribute in a very meaningful way. Talk a little bit about beliefs. The Where do you line up, at the risk of being too high level and generalizing, but where do you line up uh, personally, relative to traditional conservative congregation approach in the United States?
Okay, good question. Someone asked me from Anshe Emet how I will be able to acculturate to a conservative, very complex congregation with my modern Orthodox beliefs. So, if you'd like to meet the Rabbi Ebstein with modern Orthodox beliefs, I will give you the email address of my son, Matan, who lives in Netivot in the Gaza envelope, and I'm sure that he would love to share his views with you. This Rabbi Ebstein is a card-carrying conservative Jew who grew up in Chicago, worked at Camp Ramat in Wisconsin, taught at Solomon Schechter Day School in Skokie, and has been a proud conservative rabbi all of my professional life. In fact, my wife and I are such active members of the conservative Masorti community in Israel that Rena was chosen last year as one of a handful of people who campaigned in different countries on behalf of Merkaz. And she even addressed a group here at Anshe Emet in March of 2025.
Thanks. I'm glad you posed the question to yourself. I didn't want to presuppose that I didn't want to presupposedly confuse you with your son. So thank you for the distinction, and hopefully that clears up any confusion. And down the road, hopefully we'll have a chance to meet your son and learn more about him. Sounds like he's taken a very interesting path. You mentioned the Masorti movement. Well, what do you think the future is of Masorti synagogues in Israel?
I believe that despite the fact that our movement is small, our message continues to be relevant to many people in Israel, and therefore our future is good. But myself and many others believe that unless we get involved politically, we will never have a significant voice in this country. Unfortunately, that is just the way things work in Israel because of the parliamentary system.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that we could probably go off for an hour and talk about that because that suggests a number of things that have to happen. And that will be fascinating to follow and to watch. Um, Back to this side of the pond. How do you feel about lay-led minions like those we're leading or a constituent of our congregation are leading in the Rose Crown minion?
Very positively. The fact that different aspects of the Jewish community can exist and thrive under one roof shows that Anshe Emet is nimble, creative, and smart enough to realize that one size does not fit all. And so I very much look forward to getting to know all of the minyanim that pray under the roof of Anshe Emet and helping out with them in any ways that I can.
Great, thank you. Another question that was asked. As an interim rabbi, what would you imagine would be the areas of synagogue and synagogue life and synagogue practice that you will particularly lean into, and perhaps those you won't be as involved with?
I'm going to take my cues from the synagogue board and the clergy. I'm a team player and I'm going to focus my energies on the areas that they set as priorities for me. Having said that, if I see that something needs consideration, I will surely bring it to their attention. I had a number of discussions with members of your able clergy team, and I got a good sense of what some of the areas are that they would want me to get involved in, or any interim rabbi.
Do you have can you share what some of those are? Just to help all of us understand.
Um, yeah, I see three main areas where I could really get involved. The first would be to be a bridge. You've been lucky enough to have had the same wonderful rabbi for 44 years, who in some cases knows three generations of a family. In July of 2027, you'll be welcoming a new rabbi who will be bringing new and different leadership. In the middle of these two milestones are going to be 12 months of activity and growth and adjustment and many other things. Life will go on at Anshe Emet during this year, and it's my hope that I will be able to help Cantors Brook and Rosenberg and Rabbi Forrester to serve as a sturdy bridge for you between your past and your future. So, in that sense, I will seek to be a steadying force. You sent out a letter to the congregation. We seek steady leadership that can serve as a calming presence in this time of transition by maintaining the status quo while continuing to elevate services and simchas through their teachings. At the end of the year, I hope that I will be able to reflect back and be able to say that I provided that steady leadership by listening to people and groups in the synagogue who have something to share. And finally, just to come back to something, David, that you asked me about earlier, teaching adult ed. As a teacher, I see my role as someone who can share with others my love for Judaism, my love for Jewish learning, and some of the wisdom I've learned from modern and ancient sages. I love to learn, and I really enjoy sharing my thoughts and hopefully inspiring yours. I believe that at this time, we are in the middle of a paradigm shift in terms of Jewish life. And I look forward to figuring out with you how to respond with resilience and perhaps some new ideas.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. And you struck a chord mentioning Rabbi Siegel and the families, the three generations of many of these families that he has known and known well. And my family is one of those. When he came in 1982, I was 16 years old. My parents were in their mid to late 40s, and now my oldest of three daughters is 25. He did her baby naming. It's been a long and wonderful journey together, and I agree with you there. The first thing you mentioned about being a bridge is needed, and I think an area where you can really lean in. Last question about beliefs. One of our congregants wanted to ask the question, will you be able to open up pastoral duty to folks that have diverse lifestyles?
The foundation of my theology about humanity is that everyone is created in the image of God. This informs everything I do in my work as a rabbi and my life in general. Should I be fortunate enough to be selected as your interim rabbi, I will look forward to meeting each of you and learning about your journey. I want to emphasize that I really love getting to know people. Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, the rabbis ask, who is wise? The answer, he who learns from every person. My job as a rabbi is to engage people on things having to do with their Judaism and their lives, and everyone who wants to do that is welcome to reach out to me.
Let's turn a little bit to Israel and America. It's a topic that I think most of us are spending a lot of time thinking about today. We in America, American Jews, spend a lot of time thinking about and trying to understand events and politics in Israel, good and bad. To what degree, in your experience, having been there for now 31 years, to what degree are Israeli Jews attentive to what's going on in the United States? And in particular, are they aware, at the risk of generalizing, is there awareness of how views of Israel here in the States have shifted over these past couple of years, particularly amongst younger adults?
Yeah, really good question. So this question is like me asking you to explain what are the views of 340 million American people about A, B, or C, as if all Americans think the same. Only for me, it's worse when you are asking me this question because you know the old saying, two Jews, three opinions. Well, two Israelis, many more than that. But even so, I'm going to try to answer as best I can. Generally, Israelis are not so attentive to what is going on in the United States, except for maybe the broad strokes. Honestly, the news cycle and the drastic events here are so dynamic and complex that people have a hard time keeping up with what goes on in our country. Having said that, Israelis are painfully aware that support for Israel has dramatically declined, especially amongst those from ages 18 to 30. And there's a wide range of opinions about those numbers and about why they've come about.
Yeah, I mean that yeah, again, we could go down a rabbit hole on that one too. Does it that awareness of opinions declining, changing, how does that manifest itself? Just I'm not asking you as a rabbi, just asking you as somebody who lives there. How do you, is it discussed? Is that dinner table discussion amongst friends? How does that come out? Because it's very hard as an American, I think, to just have a sense of what's going on and try to understand what the average informed Israeli is thinking about. We get a lot of exposure to what the government's doing, what the government's thinking about, but what we don't have as great a sense into is what's going on the ground.
So, a lot of things that you may not know about, since you obviously read about what the government is doing, is that there's been really a shift in the way Israelis think about dealing with problems. And the amount and the quality of volunteer groups has skyrocketed. There's some people who aren't of the opinion that certain problems are being dealt with, and they feel like I have to do something. And you read about this every single day. So whether it's raising money for your children who are fighting and may not have everything they need, to helping those who are poor and because they're having a hard time, their relatives are off fighting, they need to be taken care of. A whole aspect of Israeli society that really is something that I would love to be able to share at great length, should I get the job.
Well, we'll look forward to that because it's a bit of a I think I can probably speak on behalf of many Americans. I think it's a bit of a black box to many of us in the States. What's going on, and it's a worry. It's a worry. I'll speak for myself. It's a worry. I don't mean to speak for others, but it's a concern that I have. We touched on it earlier, but I want to come back to it. What and how much and what kind of experience and interaction have you had as a rabbi since you made Aliyah with American synagogues, American congregations? If you talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah. The answer is about as much as possible for someone who's not living in the United States. First of all, I've served four different synagogues in either a part-time capacity or as a high holy day rabbi over the past 31 years. The longest of those experiences was being the long distance rabbi for a congregation in Tucson, Arizona for 13 years. I would head to Tucson 2 to 3 times a year, and when I wasn't there, I taught classes on Skype. Remember Skype? Most recently, as I mentioned earlier, I was the interim rabbi in Deerfield for a year. In addition, since I made Aliyah, I have spent almost every high holiday season in America, i- in an American congregational setting, leading an overflow service or as a solo rabbi for a small community without one. And in general, I spend 6 to 8 weeks in Chicago every year visiting my father, my sister, my brother, and attend services. at a conservative synagogue always.
So the answer is a lot,
A
a
lot.
lot, and varied and diverse.
Yeah, and also it's clear that in my work with families who bring their children to Israel to celebrate B'nai Mitzvah, I have a lot of contact with rabbis and cantors all across the United States. That's how I met Cantor Brook. Through meetings with the clergy about their B'nai Mitzvah children, I've maintained a connection to lots of synagogues. I've also been a scholar in residence many times, dozens of times in American congregations, scholar in residence, which really gives you, uh, it affords you a window into many different conservative communities. And finally, I serve on a confidential RA committee that oversees the content of a rabbis only email group. So as a result, I'm very aware of a lot of the issues that people are dealing with.
Yeah, that's one. And I mentioned that gives you tremendous insight into what's going on. It's kind of the conservative rabbinate equivalent of the presidential daily briefing. You've got your finger on the pulse of all the issues that are top of mind, which is great. I want to come back to Israel one more time. There's another question that was highlighted. There are some congregants that, on a good day, are ambivalent about Israel. Perhaps on a less good day, may be opposed to what the government or what the country is doing. As a longtime Israeli now, Ismail Aliyah, how would you communicate with those members of Anshe Emet?
With love and respect, one conversation at a time. If I'm to be selected to be your interim rabbi, the start of every conversation I have is going to be for people to tell me about themselves and for me to tell them about myself. And once we've established the beginnings of a relationship, I'm going to listen and I'm going to learn and I'm going to try to understand the various points of view. In fact, I hope that people who are struggling with their sentiments about Israel will take advantage of the fact that they have an Israeli rabbi in residence. And I hope that you will come and talk to me. I see this as an incredible opportunity for communication, and I hope that you will too.
Thank you. Um, in your initial letter expressing interest in this position several months ago, and by the way, for the benefit of those watching, we've now, I think, covered most, if not all, of the topics that members of the congregation submitted. I'll just offer a couple of thoughts and then really open it up to you, Rabbi Ebstein, for anything else you'd like to share. My thoughts in your original letter, uh, when talking about yourself and why this could be of interest to you, you highlighted that you thought you were authentic and inquisitive and like to learn and like to teach and were incredibly empathic and were just are just a real person. And I in my time getting to know you, I would echo those sentiments and highlight your sense of self-awareness. And it's come through loud and clear this morning, at least from my perspective. And I really appreciate the extent to which you've been just direct and transparent and real in your answer to questions, a broad set of questions, some more general and some quite, some a little bit more provocative. So thank you, and love especially your last answer. I am not one of those congregants who is uh, opposed to what Israel is doing, but I love that answer. Come take advantage of me. Come push me. Come test your beliefs. I think that's wonderful. What else as we approach the end of the hour? And I want to be respectful of people's time. What else? Anything else you'd like to share, or that hasn't come out, or that wasn't asked directly, that you think would be interesting and helpful for people in the congregation to just get a better sense of you?
Um, I'm not sure if I've had the opportunity to share a little bit about my background, but I'm married. I have 4 children. And as of this past Wednesday, four grandchildren. I was born and raised in Chicago. I got a BA from Washington University and graduated from the JTS Rabbinical School in 1988. That I've had a number of different jobs as a pulpit rabbi, working with Hillel in the former Soviet Union, being a long distance rabbi in Tucson, and now the work that I do in Israel with my congregant, with my families that come in to celebrate with me, and sometimes I travel to different countries to celebrate with them. So I think in the amount of time that we have, that's an idea to give you like a taste of that. I would really love the opportunity to teach and to meet the people at Anchamit. And I look forward to getting to know as many of you as I can. Having been through this process in other places before, I can say that I am humbled by how committed and serious the search committee has been throughout. It speaks volumes about the community of Anshe Emet, and it is a thriving, growing community that I would love to be a part of this coming year. So I want to wish you all Shavua Tov and Chodesh Tov and happy Rosh Chodesh Sivan.
Thank you. And continuing with your Tove theme, if I heard you correctly, you've got a fourth grandchild as of last Wednesday, so Mazel Tov.
Thank you.
And
Thank
that's
you.
that's that's wonderful. Um, I think that brings us to an end. And Emma, unless there is something else that we need to do before just disconnecting and shutting down, I will bring it to a close. Rabbi Epstein, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to be a member of this search committee. Sam and Danny have really led an effort that has been fulsome, has been detailed and dedicated and time consuming. And it's for me, the biggest and best part has been to meet a range of people. And then this morning, culminating in a detailed conversation with you. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for your interest. And thank you just for being so authentic this morning. And with that, we'll let people return to their Sunday mornings or Sunday afternoons, as the case may be. And really appreciate it and hope everybody has a good rest of the day. Thanks, Rabbi Epstein.
Okay. My pleasure. Shalom.
Shalom.
Bye.